Welcome back, fellow renovators, renovation and DIY fans, and everyone else who simply enjoys watching an impressive amount of mess being created 1 week at a time. This week has been bitterly cold in places, off the charts wet, and incredibly windy across the United Kingdom. For all of you weather watchers out there, it's been a particularly soggy, pond-like sort of week here in Devonshire. Quite frankly, it's been downright horrible. That said, it's been absolutely delightful if you're a duck, or if you have a deep and abiding love of splashing about in thigh-deep water. We haven't been washed away this week, but we have most certainly felt the force of the weather, howling winds racing around the house and down the chimneys, and a garden that has now officially reached peak bog status. Despite all of this meteorological chaos, we did manage another brief trip to London to collect a few auction purchases, which is always exciting. This time, we headed to the Savoy to collect some rather heavy, fully lined silk curtains, an extra large upholstered headboard, and a few other pieces that will slowly find their way into the house as the rooms begin to come together. Naturally, we also managed to sneak in a quick afternoon tea before loading up the van and heading back to Devon through conditions that were, once again, both windy and wet. Back at the house, things quickly returned to their usual state of dusty disarray. Watson has been working hard to remove all of the gypsum plaster from the walls in the courtyard bedroom, while I've been removing the laths from the internal staircase wall in the same room. This will allow us to check the condition of the framing timbers and insulate the internal wall from this side, rather than from the stairwell. And finally, lots of beautiful wallpapers have been landing through our letterbox this week, ready for consideration for the boot room and our first guest bedroom. If you'd like a sneak peek, do head over to our Patreon page, where we've shared a little glimpse of what's happening behind the scenes, and do let us know which ones you love and can't wait to see gracing the walls of Torgate House over the coming months. So let us begin. As you'll know if you watched last week's episode, we're officially at the very start of our renovation journey of this 1894 country house, right in the heart of Dartmoor, Devon. Last week we removed all of the rubble from the first of our soon-to-be guest bedrooms. This week, however, we have moved into the courtyard bedroom, which is very much our nemesis room. This room is, without question, in worse condition than any other room in the house. We've known for a few months now that water has been seeping in through the brickwork of the chimney. The causes are many and varied: blown render on the exterior, a lack of sealant around the chimney trays, and, sadly, some rather poor workmanship when the chimneys were rebuilt back in 2010, which we will be remedying shortly. A month or so ago, after opening up the plasterboard wall, I uncovered the original fireplace and rather dramatically discovered rainwater entering and flowing straight down the brickwork. At the moment, we are patiently waiting for either spring or better weather, whichever decides to arrive first, so that we can erect a large scaffolding rig around this chimney and the one beside it. The plan is to re-render both, fully seal them, and replace a few cracked tiles while we're up there. In the meantime, it's finally time to get all of the gypsum plaster off the walls, inspect every wooden beam hidden behind, and give everything a thorough woodworm treatment, just for good measure. We'll then be insulating with something far more cosy and forgiving, namely thick, glorious sheep's wool, and removing all of the horrible PIR board that has been lurking behind the plaster. Now, Kenya has been working very hard to round up the sheep that keep wandering into our garden. Her natural savannah cat instincts appear to have well and truly kicked in, and she has confidently taken on her new role of sheep herder with what she believes to be expert ability. She absolutely loves the task, although we are still fine-tuning the concept of rounding up, rather than enthusiastically chasing them straight back out, and quite some distance away, which doesn't really assist with then shearing them for their wool. So for now, we'll keep Kenya in training and see how she gets on over the next few weeks. Failing that, we may have to place an order for our wool insulation the slightly more conventional way, arriving in neat bats, ready to install. Meanwhile, back in the courtyard bedroom, we started by removing all of the carpet grips. Watson then moved on to the skirting boards, which we'll be stripping and reusing when we eventually put this room back together. It's been quite something to see just how many different lengths of nails and screws have been used to hold them in place over the years. Some, as you can imagine, far easier to remove than others. We also had a few electrical cables running through the noggins that needed to be carefully removed, along with the original edging to the plasterwork around the fireplace. Watson has been keeping any framing timber, or wood in general, that can be reused, and everything that's rotten or simply no longer fit for purpose is being removed. He's already spent several evenings this week over in the coach house, patiently denailing timber so it can be reused for some upcoming non-structural work. You can see quite clearly in this room just how necessary it is for us to take the plaster down, so that we can properly understand the full extent of what's been happening behind it. The wall has blackened in places, likely due in part to old soot and smoke from the fireplace before the chimneys were rebuilt, but also from long-term water ingress that has been taking place quietly behind the scenes for many years. Like most Victorian houses, there is also a surprising amount of rubble stored within the framing timbers, beneath the floors and above the ceilings, often left behind when walls have been replastered in the past. It's something we see time and time again, where it's simply been easier to push debris behind or under the floors, out of sight, rather than carry it out and dispose of it properly in a skip. As we go, we'll be removing all of this excess material and unnecessary weight from the house, so that we're back to a clean, honest slate and can begin rebuilding properly, with a full understanding of what's really going on. We still have our rubble chute up and running in the bedroom across the hallway, so as Watson was pulling all of the gypsum plaster down from the walls, it was immediately heading straight down the chute and into the skip. The skip is already looking fairly full, but we're hopeful it will take the rest of this room, along with the majority of the pink bedroom where the chute is currently located. Once the initial rubble had been cleared, Watson decided it made sense to pull down the silver-backed plasterboard from the sloping ceilings and remove all of the Celotex insulation as well, so that we could really see what's been going on behind the scenes. The lath and plaster you can see directly in front of Watson here is actually the back of the wall belonging to our fifth bedroom in the main house. That room sits slightly lower on the first landing as you come up the main staircase, which is why you can see what is effectively its ceiling here, currently covered with old synthetic insulation. So it isn't just this room that's become our nemesis. The fifth bedroom is very much involved too. The chimney sits directly between the two spaces and has caused damage on both sides, as well as into the stairwell itself, and down into the to-be kitchen that sits directly below this courtyard bedroom. This entire area is going to require a fair amount of work over the coming months to properly put right, and finally seal from the elements once and for all. As a result, we'll be returning to this section of the house quite a bit. It's not a fast job by any means, but one that needs to be done carefully and properly. We may also look at lining this area within the eaves above the fifth bedroom to create some additional attic storage, which could be incredibly useful in the future. Here you can see some of our rather sad-looking, soaking wet, rotten roof rafters. And now, for a little bit of fun, try saying rotten roof rafters really fast 10 times in a row. You can see here that this vertical timber is absolutely soaking wet, which is why it's so dark in colour. Moving upward, both of these horizontal pieces, acting as battens, are completely drenched as well. Then, along the rafter, you can clearly see where the underside is wet, with water having run down it and also been absorbed back up into the timber. The rafters at the front will be sistered with new timber, any rotten sections removed, and new noggins added in the areas where we'll be sheeting up again. As we've mentioned over the last few weeks, it's been exceptionally wet here in the UK, and ideally during the winter months one's roof and chimneys are in good working order. Sadly ours are not, and as a result we've been enjoying what can only be described as a mini Niagara Falls making its way into the house. At the moment we have pots collecting water in this room and directly below in the kitchen, along with one of our large enamel bowls in the 5th bedroom, catching the drips coming down the other side of the chimney, along the ceiling rafters and onto the floor. So for now, it's very much a case of pan juggling here at Torgate for the next few months, while we get all of this properly under control. So, with a bit more tidying up, as Watson does love a tidy worksite, and the skirting boards removed and safely stored in the guest bedroom, he got straight back to taking the plaster off the walls. The good news is that, across the rest of the room, the brickwork behind the plaster is 100% most definitely dry, which is always a welcome discovery. At this point, Watson was able to get his first proper glimpse of the ring beams on this side of the window, and as suspected, these were also rotten. As you'll have seen when we opened up the guest bedroom on the other side of the corridor, we discovered rotten ring beams there as well, none of which had been replaced during the works carried out back in 2010. So this time around, we'll be replacing all of the ring beams in each of the upstairs rooms, one by one, as we work our way through the house. We then made a few more trips to the rubble chute to clear the floor once again, giving us enough space to safely position the ladder. The next task was to take down the plasterboard along the sloping sides of the ceiling, so that we could access the rafters and eventually add in some sheep's wool insulation. We're not taking down the end wall of plaster this week, as we can clearly hear a hollow space within it. That suggests there may be an old doorway somewhere near the centre of the wall, hidden behind where the radiator is currently positioned. So, the plan is to remove the radiator shortly, and then carefully take the plaster back in the area where we can hear the hollow first, to see whether we do indeed have another doorway hiding there, which would be rather exciting. We'll most likely take the plaster down in the master bedroom next door first, as it's not in great condition. That will allow us to remove it completely, see whether there is an opening present, and at the same time preserve the majority of the plaster on this internal wall where it's still in good condition. By doing it this way, we can insulate internally from the master bedroom side and retain as much original material as possible, where it makes sense to do so. So the final wall for us to tackle in this room is the lath and plaster wall that backs onto the stairwell. For the most part, this wall is actually in good condition, other than the first foot or so where it meets the end wall, right where our miniature Niagara Falls has been making itself known. Despite that, we'll be taking all of this plaster down so the internal wall can breathe properly once again, but also so we can check the condition of the studwork behind it and insulate from this side. As you can imagine, any stairwell in an old Victorian house tends to be fairly chilly, so to help this bedroom retain its heat, we don't want warmth being lost into the stairwell. Equally, we don't want any warmth that does build up in the stairwell escaping straight into the bedrooms. With Watson removing the plaster and me removing the laths, we made fairly short work of it. All of the laths are being kept. These aren't the original ones from 1894. They appear to be relatively modern, so we suspect they were installed during the renovation work carried out in 2010. That said, they're incredibly useful. Untreated, free from chemicals, and perfect for kindling, as well as being ideal for use as packers. So, After a fair amount of destruction, the courtyard bedroom is now breathing nicely and beginning to dry out where it can, other than, of course, along that far wall where the water is still making its way in. The next task is to move straight onto the pink bedroom, as we still have some space left in the skip, which we very much intend to make the most of before it's collected at the end of the week. Then, partway through the week, we had to put everything on hold to jump in the van and head up to London. I had, once again, made a few auction purchases for pieces intended for our guest bedroom and various corners of the house. As anyone who lives in a cold country knows, particularly this one, fully lined curtains are something of a necessity. Sadly, they also tend to come at quite an expense, especially when you have rather large windows and live on top of a hill, as we do. So when the opportunity arose to pick up fully lined silk curtains from the Savoy Hotel in London, I felt I simply couldn't let them go. I jumped onto the online auction first thing in the morning, which appeared to be before most of the dealers had logged on, and managed to secure 3 sets of curtains in a beautiful French grey-green leaf pattern, along with 2 additional sets as backups. Now, I hadn't seen any of these in person, so I was still fairly cautious. Just because something comes from the Savoy doesn't automatically mean it will be right. Luckily they were, and even so, I'd already decided that if they weren't quite right for us, I'd simply sell them on to someone else in need, so they felt like a good all-round purchase regardless. I also managed to secure a headboard for the guest bed. Long term, I have something very particular in mind, a beautiful wooden frame, which I know could take quite some time to source, as they don't come up very often. I'll be sharing more of that over on Patreon over the coming weeks, so you can all let me know what you think. For now though, I wanted a headboard that I could reupholster in a fabric of my choosing, without having to rope Watson into making one, or making it myself at this stage. We drove up to London on a very windy and wet day, navigating our way through traffic and passing by Battersea Power Station. For anyone who hasn't visited since it was redeveloped, we'd highly recommend it. Here's a little glimpse inside their rather Willy Wonka-style glass elevator, installed in one of the towers. The views across London from above are quite extraordinary. Anyway, back to the drive. We continued on past Westminster and Big Ben, then past New Scotland Yard before finally turning into the back of the Savoy Hotel. We parked up and decided that it would be rude not to stop for afternoon tea before collecting everything, so we sat down for a lovely hour or so to enjoy tea and cakes before heading round to meet Steve from the Savoy's auction team at the back door. The van was already fairly full with a few other items we'd been storing and had collected from family, but we managed to squeeze everything in before heading back out of London and beginning the long drive home to Devon. We will share everything we picked up in a week or two, once the dust is back under control and we've had a chance to properly unpack everything from our trip to the Savoy. And with that, thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate you being here, and we can't wait to share more of our journey with you next week, especially now that we're truly getting stuck in. As always, we'd love to hear your thoughts, so do drop your comments below as we love reading them each week. If you've enjoyed this episode, please help to like, subscribe and give the channel a little hype. It genuinely makes a huge difference, and we truly love you being a part of our journey. We look forward to seeing you all again very soon.